Hey loves, good morning. I'm Brenna Paxton, your guide to astral and earthly travel. And today I wanted to talk about the idea of choosing to be optimistic. And really, optimistic, the word gets such a bad rap because I think so often people can confuse this idea of optimism with spiritual bypassing, where you are choosing to ignore harsh realities, or not even harsh realities, just the reality of life, of challenge, of struggle, which is an inherent part of life. Choosing to ignore that, bypass it, in an attempt to make yourself feel better, which really isn't helpful at all. If anything, it's dangerous. So often people can think that optimism doesn't have this, or isn't, it's not possible for optimism to have this grounded reality, or a sense of life as it is. People think that optimism is just this ignorance or naivety, and that perhaps people who are optimistic have never dealt with anything challenging in life. And that couldn't be farther from the truth, at least as it pertains to me. I can only speak for myself. But so often people comment on or ask me, like, how is it that I remain so optimistic? And it's a choice. It's a choice. And the reason I wanted to talk about this topic is because lately I haven't been feeling so naturally optimistic, and I have to choose to believe in a positive outcome. I have to choose to believe that even when challenging things are happening, I'm going to glean deeper wisdom and insights from them that will contribute to my life positively, even if I have to go through challenging experiences in order to eventually get there, right? So, I think I just wanted to spend some time kind of explaining how I got to this point, how I am optimistic on a regular basis. And truly, if someone thinks I'm always optimistic, they don't spend enough time with me. I am definitely optimistic, but I'm also a realist. I really experience the full spectrum of emotions in life. And I think that's kind of part of the reason to live. I mean, there's no way to know what the reason is. But if I am alive and I'm experiencing life as a human, I want to experience it to the fullest, and that includes a whole range of emotions. So I'm constantly seeking greater depth. I'm not necessarily seeking happiness always, because I think that happiness is just such a piece of the whole experience. It's a small part of it, and I truly find fulfillment in harder emotions that have more depth and wisdom. And I'm not saying that happiness doesn't have wisdom within it. It truly does. But perhaps happiness isn't the right word. It's more a sense of contentment or fulfillment that I find, well, fulfilling. Rather than just simple happiness, like I think of emotions as colors. And I want to be able to use the entire rainbow. I don't want to be limited to just this little palette over here. So in that sense, when I speak of optimism means so much more to me than just dismissing all of the negative emotions in order to focus on the positive ones. Optimism is much more about choosing to believe that there will be a positive and beneficial outcome later down the road. That's all it is. Doesn't mean I'm not still going to experience challenging times, and that I won't feel the depth of those challenging emotions, because I will and I do. But it's more of the knowing that everything happens at once, that linear time is only one facet of our experience, and that in another parallel universe, or in some time space soon that I can access and reach and will eventually get to, I I know that that version of myself will find contentment and peace and fulfillment. And that any experience I go through will bring me greater wisdom. And appreciating that and being grateful for that, it just helps give me a way of being grateful for even the challenging times. That's how optimism works for me. And I definitely got to this point. I made this decision pretty early on in life, but that's because I was confronted with a lot of big life questions early on in my life, in my childhood. So for a lot of people who have known me more recently, it seems as though my life is just sunshine and rainbows, and that things have been pretty easy for me. And while in one sense, yes, that's true, especially because I'm a privileged person, I'm a white person, I'm a middle class person, and I've been set up to be able to have my life be easier in that privileged way than many people. But in terms of emotional experiences or traumatic experiences, or just those challenging life things that happen, I experienced a lot of that really early on in my childhood, and in my adolescence, which really caused me, it was this pivotal time in my life when I was 13, 14, 15, where you're really starting to form your concept of reality of the world and of how things work and what kind of person you want to be as you grow into yourself more. So I definitely made the conscious choice when I was younger, in those more formative years, to choose. I don't remember how old I was. I can only imagine I was 14. That seems like the right age. But I remember making the conscious choice that either everything mattered or nothing did. And the truth is that the way I got to that decision was because I believed nothing mattered. It's not coming from this naive place of, oh, everything is so happy and good and easy that I'm just going to choose that everything's going to be happy and good and easy forever. No, the opposite, actually. My sister had an eating disorder when I was growing up, and she was very suicidal. And I don't want to speak for her story too much. I only experienced it from my perspective. But when I was young, I was really faced with the idea of life and death, of what's the point of living. And I asked a lot of those questions because people around me were asking those questions in a very serious way that had consequences, not just hypothetically. And so there was a while where I was depressed and I was very high functioning. I didn't talk to people about it. I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about it. And I remember just feeling like there was no point. And I think part of that was a journey of trying to understand other experiences of those around me, of what was their perspective, why didn't life matter to them, and did it matter? It brought up those questions in a very big way. So I asked those questions too, and I get that side of things. I understand why things seem so pointless. and like just a headache to deal with when it would be easier not to. I get that. And quite frankly, I couldn't live with that perspective on life. I knew that wasn't a good direction for my head to go in. I knew that that perspective would just sink me deeper and deeper into sadness and despair and hopelessness. And that wasn't a very fun way to live. And not just fun. I'm not trying to make this all trivial. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it other than that wasn't going to work for me. That was going to take me in a real bad direction. And I guess at one point I realized that I could choose that either nothing mattered or everything mattered. And I chose everything. I didn't feel like you could pick and choose little pieces of, oh, I care about this, but not about this. I'm going to ignore this, but I'm going to really focus on this over here. No. Like, either everything has meaning or nothing has meaning. Either everything is special or nothing is. Either everything is worth it or nothing is worth it. And it just wasn't in me to resign myself to thinking that nothing matters. And I mean, the truth is that both halves of this equation are true. Everything is a paradox. I'll say that over and over and over again. And I think when I started pondering this whole life and death, do things matter or not question, those big questions, that's when I think I started understanding paradox. Because I knew both were true. And it's amazing how it truly does come down to choosing which side you're on, how you're going to view life. And I know that it's not that simple. I know that sometimes it feels like you can't choose. But I think that it is a choice. It just builds on itself over time, slowly. And I just happened to make that choice when I was 14 or 15. So now as a 28-year-old, when people see me, that choice to maintain a sense of there is a positive side to life, even when it's challenging, and especially when it's challenging, there's a positive side to life. And there can be and will be a positive outcome, or at least a fulfilling outcome. I've had many, many years of practicing making that choice on a daily basis. So I truly embody that mindset nowadays. And I think that's why sometimes people dismiss my optimism as naive, because they can't see the full depth of where that choice has come from and how much work it has taken to truly commit to that idea, to that perspective. And it's funny because in one way, it's the easiest choice that you can make, and in the other, it's the hardest. And it's funny because I just feel like lately I've really had to make that decision, and it's been difficult. I have to convince myself of it. Some days I just wake up remembering that this is how I feel about life. Some days it doesn't take much to convince me. Other days, like more recently, I have to really convince myself. I have to go through this whole cycle of processing my emotions, of figuring out why I feel the way I do, in order to then guide myself to a different outcome. So one time a few months ago, I was feeling really anxious and really upset and really nervous about life and how it was going to play out, and facing some challenges and some fears. And I just had a total breakdown. And after this breakdown, or perhaps in the middle of it, I remembered the pattern of my life, the way my life works. And it truly is this concept of teaching myself and reminding myself of the way life works, the way it actually works for me. Because it's so easy to believe all of these concepts of life. Ooh, it just started pouring outside. I love it. I love thunderstorms. Oh, it feels so cozy. It makes me happy. But I do need to run some errands, so now I'm like, darn it, I should have gone before it started raining. Oh well. That feels weirdly related. Like the fact that I love thunderstorms feels somehow optimistic in and of itself. Anyway, a few months ago, when I was feeling some despair, I really had to remind myself of the way life works rather than just believing the way life works from other people's perspectives. Because you really can't rely on other people's perspectives very often. I mean, it's helpful to hear other people's points of view, but really only if they're actually helpful points of view, not negative ones that are full of doom and gloom and fear and shame. So, sometimes that programming can start playing out in your head and saying oh no, this bad thing happened, now everything bad is gonna happen, or everything's too good right now, bad things are gonna come soon. None of that is true. That is the most infuriating to me. Stop believing that crap, that if something good is happening, something bad must follow. No. That's the easiest way to self-sabotage, is by believing that one. But I was remembering that every time in my life that I've kind of had a real freak out and then a breakdown or something, what always follows is this miraculous series of events where I remember the truth of life and of my life, and a beautiful epiphany usually comes from it. I surrender. That's what the breakdown really brings, is surrender to the cosmos, to the flow of life, instead of me trying to control everything. It's my breakdowns always kind of happen when I desire to control the outcome because I'm nervous about what the outcome could be. So I try to control it, and then I can't really control it because that's impossible, at least to a certain extent. The external outcomes of things I can't control. So then that's what leads to the breakdown. And then in the breakdown is when I realized that this idea of control is an illusion, and one that I was clinging to, and that's actually why I feel the anxiety I do. So then I surrender, and I feel free and liberated from the burden of thinking I can control the outcome of things, because it's not possible. So then I liberate myself of that burden. And then that's when things take a turn for the better. That's when I recommit to remembering that things will be okay. That's when I make the choice to be optimistic. It's when I make the choice to decide that the outcome will be beautiful, even if it's challenging. Even when it's challenging, the outcome will bring deeper wisdom, will bring deeper fulfillment, will bring a deeper sense of awareness of who I am. And that's the point of life, is to have a deeper sense of awareness. So I hope that makes some sense, because it truly is like this ongoing cycle of recommitting to this path of optimism. And it doesn't mean spiritual bypassing. It doesn't mean not facing reality. It doesn't mean dismissing negative emotions or challenging times. It simply means surrendering to the idea that you will always be delivered to truth. The idea that if you follow the path rather than trying to control where you're going, that good things will come from that. That's what optimism is to me. And I'm not saying it's always easy to make that choice. For me, it hasn't been that easy lately. But I think the thing that's been reminding me of that choice and my ability to make that choice has been the idea of my inner child just wanting to play. Because really, that's all we ever want in life. I know that sounds silly, perhaps, but all we really want to do is play and have fun and create and love and laugh as much as we can. That's what everyone wants. That's like the goal, right? So when we can tap into our inner child and we can laugh with that version of ourselves and we allow ourselves to play freely and we allow ourselves to create, I think it reminds us that life is this constantly unfolding journey without any way to control the outcomes. And that's where the magic lies in life. If we could control the outcome, then creating wouldn't be very fun. Like, you can have an idea in mind of where you're headed or of what you're creating, but there's always a surprise element to it, always. And that's what makes life exciting, is that it's surprising and unexpected. And that includes some really hard emotions. But it's also what makes it great. It's all about the grand mystery. And I think I enjoy that mystery. I love it. And sometimes I need to remind myself that I love it. That's what I'm doing right now. Brenna, I love the mystery. Don't forget. The most exciting things happen when you have no idea what's going to happen next. I love you, friend. I'll talk to you later.